Holy scoobity doobities. Here we are, everybody. I don't know who's there yet. Somebody. Ben's here. I'm here. It's a little tricky getting on tonight because, hey, I'm a dad too. And sometimes your kids are struggling with stuff and they got to talk to you. And it's part of life, part of the experience. But anyway, we'll try to move on from that and fire them up for you guys because there's some Packer stuff to get to tonight. And we're hanging out and we're drinking. I'm doing more Madtown Nut Brown, as you saw already. Ben, he's somewhere on there. Ben, where are you at?
I'm not drinking anything right now.
Not a boy. That's fine. It's not a problem. But you got a nice
shirt. Glass is empty.
Oh, you got a nice shirt on there, though.
Yeah, it'd be nice if there's basketball.
I know.
Bucks are the best team.
Be nice if there's lots of stuff like that right
no
now.
Basketball.
Yeah.
So that stinks.
It does. A lot of it stinks. But I don't know. Everybody's trying to make the best of stuff. Weather's nice today. Weather's going to be a little too hot next week for us who grew up in Algoma. But
it's too hot today. I was sweating my butt up. Just walking to my car after work.
There's so many people that are like, "Oh, Eric's here. Hey, Eric, how you doing tonight? Glad you're around. Was it too hot by you today? I don't know. If it gets like much above 70, man. Whew.
Yep, 70 is too much. 69 or lower for me. I can take negative degrees, but I cannot take above like 70 or that's too much. Forget it. I don't know how. Okay, let me ask you this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Our parents do not have air conditioning. We never had air conditioning at our house. And when I was a kid, I didn't see like younger, growing up, even in like, high school and all this stuff. Even in college, when I'd go back home in the summer, a couple summers in a row, I don't ever remember being like sweaty, gross, slime ball. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But then once I had an apartment with air conditioning, because even like the dorms didn't have air conditioning when I was there the first couple of years. But once I had an apartment with air conditioning, then it's like anything above 70, I'm roasting. And I just immediately start just getting gross and slimy. Like, am I right about that? Like, did you like remember us? Like, we grew up, we never felt like that. And I know we lived in Algoma, which is always 5-10 degrees cooler than every place else in Wisconsin. But still, it was like, I don't know. It's just weird. And now I can't even go outside when it's 70 degrees. I'm just like, nope, grass is getting cut today. Not happening.
Well, I mean, there's one thing about that weather. It's like, hey, if you want to loaf around, do nothing, some of it's a little warmer. It's not too bad. But for like working or doing anything, I don't know. If it's much over 70 degrees, like forget it for me. I'll do it, but I'll sweat my butt off and I don't like it. That's for sure. I don't know. Eric, what do you think? Anybody else listening or out there? Anybody else in the world? Eric says 70s here today. Eric, do you like working? There's our first question. Who likes working outside when it's more than 70 degrees? More than 69 degrees? Not me. Not Ben.
This is a bad start. We're starting with the weather. We gotta.
Hey, the weather. And the thing, we're completely turning it on its head because everybody else would be like, "It's the best day of the year. It's so nice."
Dude, I'll say this too. I drove through downtown Rochester today, and there's people all over the goddamn place, like all over the place, walking everywhere, driving everywhere, riding bikes. Like everybody's next to each other.
Yeah,
they've all got masks. A lot of them have masks on.
Well, that's good at least.
Still, like,
that's good at least.
I don't know. It's just weird.
It is all very weird, and we get people want to, people are restless. People want to get back to some sort of normalcy. We get all that. Mom's here. Mom, love you. We also get that, we just got to be at this point, like some stuff's got to go back. We get that too. So now it's just about, hey, using the time, using the information you got, being responsible, being respectful, and hopefully making wise decisions. But we'll see how it all goes from here. Anyway, all right, there's our statement for the health crisis for tonight. We'll move on from that. I know Ben likes to get political once in a while, but we'll try to stay away from politics too as well.
Yeah, I love that.
All right. So there's some interesting stuff in the Packer world. I don't know if the Raiders have anything interesting happening. Oh, dad and mom are both on. Wow, watch out. Separately too. But some interesting stuff in the Packer world are that Aaron Rodgers spoke publicly for the first time since the draft today. So 32 plus minutes and not a lot of really interesting things said other than if you're one of the people like Skip Bayless or whatever that says he's such a jerk or really surly or angry or whatever all the time, he seemed to be pretty laid back today with all his answers to a whole bunch of questions. Some good questions, some dumb questions. No, you disagree? What did you think?
No, I agree. I'm saying it was pretty
okay.
much. It was pretty much like when he did his LEL whatever RELAX thing. It was like he was totally relaxed the whole entire time. He didn't. He was just like whatever.
Now somebody asked him a
He said
question.
he wasn't thrilled about the Jordan Love draft pick, and he was surprised.
Yeah.
But he said, "I understand it. I understand they're looking to the future. That's what they have to do. I get it." Blah blah blah. He said it all nice and normal and fine. He talked about the current roster as it is, thinking that it's got potential to do better than last year, even with the returning players that they are bringing back and their roles expanding. And that's a good thing. He seems optimistic on that front because people asked him like, oh, they didn't get a receiver and all that dumb stuff. And he named all the guys and all their, he called Alan Lazard an ascending player. He said he's excited for EQ to come back. He said he's got confidence in MBS. He said Kumaro is steady and solid. He said Funches has got a high IQ, a football IQ, apparently, which that blows my mind. I didn't know that.
Who knew that? Who knew?
I don't know. That's what he says. Rodgers said he talked about it on the phone a couple times, and that's what he said. So, hey.
Nice.
That's good. He talked about Jamal Williams. Apparently, his workout regimen, he's got videos and pictures all over Twitter or something, and he's like a monster or something. That's all he's been doing, working out. That's another thing he said was really important. He said this, because they asked him about the, not being able to be at the facility and not being able to work with everybody on the field and this and that. And he said, it's not a problem, for most guys, especially our team, because a lot of our guys are coming back. And he also said, what you'll see who are the guys that are doing the work on their own and who are the guys who aren't as dedicated. And that was a very important thing he said. So, that's good to know. To be honest, I think a lot of the Packer players that they have on the roster are guys that do the work on their own. And that's probably like they're overachieving what their physical abilities are. Because obviously the drafts aren't the greatest. So these guys must do something, you know what I mean? Like, they have all these guys who are undrafted or low picks who are making considerable, having a considerable job and doing a great job with this team. And they're kind of overachieving and they work hard and they do their roles. And I think that's something that Rodgers said because he compared it to the 2011 strike thing that almost happened, saying how, when they came back, a lot of the guys felt better than ever because they weren't all worn down, but they still worked out. And he said you could tell who the guys were that, really, really worked out on their own and who the guys that didn't. And the guys that didn't play, obviously. And then that 2011 team was 15-1. So, hey, that's good news for us, right?
Yeah, it's true. Those were, I think he said it slightly differently than that, saying that those other guys might need a little bit more structure or weren't maybe high self-motivated or something like that. But yeah, the same gist, the same point. And it was, but that is a good point. And I think, the type of people they have, we talked about this before, changing the culture and having the, good guys, good people on the roster. And that shows this time it should show. Those hopefully guys are doing what there's other than, David Bakhtiari. I'm sure he works hard too, but he likes to lounge his bathtub or do other weird stuff and put himself on Twitter. Apparently he was in his bathtub on one of the Zoom meetings with the team or something in a bubble bath. And
Yeah,
it,
well, it wasn't him. It was one of the
okay,
reporters. I don't remember who asked him. They were asked him about watching the Last Dance, the Bulls documentary thing,
yeah,
and then and Rodgers brought up the Rodman thing that happened. I don't know if you've seen that at all. I watched all of them just because why not? There's nothing else to do. But you know me, I hate Jordan now as well. But anyways, so they said to him, "Well, who's the Dennis Rodman on your team?" And then he was like, "I really don't know." And then some of the reporters like, "Bakhtiari, huh?" I think it was your buddy Amy
I think it
Nagler.
was Nagler who asked two of the dumbest questions of that
Yeah,
whole
he did.
30
He
some
asked
minutes.
two questions that had nothing to do with anything. But anyways, yeah. So you're right. It was Nagler. Now that I remember. But yeah, so they compared Bakhtiari to Rodman, which is nuts because Bakhtiari has got way more discipline and is way more of a
Yeah,
team player. Don't get me wrong, Rodman. I don't know if you watched that documentary,
no,
but the
I
third
didn't watch it.
episode is about Rodman pretty much. Most of it's about Rodman, and it was
Okay,
pretty cool to watch it, to be honest. And they showed him behind the scenes, and he would spend hours and hours watching video of guys shooting and seeing where they missed most often. He's like, you think I got all those? Then they had like interviews with him nowadays. He's like, you think I got all those rebounds because I just ran really hard and you know just happened to be in the right place? He's like, no, I knew when every single player in the NBA, when they shot, how they usually missed, and where the ball would go most of the time, and that's where I went to get the rebound. And it's got to be true because how would a guy get 20 some rebounds? He was averaging 20 rebounds a game there for a while. It was crazy,
yeah,
and it was because that's all he studied, and he really, really worked on it.
true,
So
straight.
he's crazy, and as a person in real life probably, but as a player, I mean, he studied hard, and he came from nowhere. When you find out where he came from, like honestly, if you don't watch any of these dumb shows, that Last Dance stuff, watch the third episode. I mean, Rodman, if you're not a Rodman fan, that's fine, but like you have a little bit more respect for him as a player and what he did, as opposed to just because I always thought he was just a crazy lunatic who just ran around and got rebounds and shoved guys and made me mad as a Bucks fan.
Yeah,
My Bucks on right now, but that was a good episode there, the number 3, which was the Rodman one. But I
Butter
digress to
says.
the Packers.
Butter's here. Hey, Butter. Butter
What's up,
says
bud?
Last Dance is awesome, so he likes it.
Yeah, I
And
mean I hate Jordan. I always will. I always have. There's no doubt about it. He's I don't want to get into it.
he got some unfair advantages, but he
Let's just say,
also
how can the guy who's supposed to be the best player, the best NBA player of all time, how does he get so many ticky-tack fouls called for him? That's all I know.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there's one spot. I don't know if when you watch it, they talk about the Dream Team, and there's a photo shoot between Jordan, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson, and the 3 of them are together to get a picture for the Dream Team, right? They got their Dream Team USA uniforms on. This is the first time that professional players were on the USA basketball team, because before that, the 4 years before, they had only college students, and they lost. They didn't win it that year. They didn't get the gold that year. So then in '92, they're like, all right, we're winning this time. We're getting all the best players. They did have 2 college players in there. I think it was Grant Hill and Christian Leitner. Everybody else was NBA players. But anyways, so they're taking this picture with those 3 main guys who have been MVPs and won all the championships and all that kind of stuff, right? We're big players. And it's funny because Jordan's sitting in front. You got Larry Bird over here, Magic over here. Larry Bird kind of moves in a little closer to Jordan. And then Magic says, whoa, Larry, don't get too close. I might call a foul on you. And I was like, oh, Magic Johnson. That was the truth. As a Bucks fan, and you know this,
yeah.
I don't know how many times the whistle would not blow for a foul on Jordan's shot until after the ball hit the rim and missed. Then all of a sudden, beep, whistle. You're like, and then there were games where he had 38 points, and he shot 25 free throws, and somehow he didn't even shoot 50% in those games. And half of those free throw shots he got were on misses that the whistle was blown after the shot was missed, and they gave him the foul so he could shoot the free throws. The guy he was a freak, yes. He made some incredible plays. He had some great game-winning shots and all that kind of stuff. But he had every advantage put to him. And as a Bucks fan, when we watched the Bucks continuously get screwed for years and years and years and years. First, they had to go, especially the late '80s, early '90s. They had to get beat the crap out of by the Pistons. I'll never forget when Larry Kostoviak got his butt creamed by freaking Crap, what's that guy? The big white dude from the Pistons. What was his name?
Which one? Lame beer?
Lane Beer hit him. He went up for a layup. Lane Beer just shoved him and broke his freaking back or his leg or something. Yeah. He was out for the rest of the series, and the Bucks got knocked out of the playoffs in the first round that year. And Krzyzewski was never the same after that. And he was a good player. He was my favorite player. He was a power forward at the time. And he was never good ever again after that because his leg was all messed up.
Yeah.
And then after that, they had to go play the Bulls all the time. We got every freaking call under the sun. That's the other thing. They showed some of these scores, by the way, in this. Oh, you shouldn't have got me going.
No, hold on. You said you didn't want to get into it, and then you just went all into it.
The Bulls won like 84-78. Yeah, and like it was just ugly. And then the funny part was this. Then they talked about the season where Jordan retired. It was the season after that. Yeah. They were scoring 100-some points, and like Scottie Pippen was getting like 12 assists a game, and like everybody was scoring, and they were killing everybody. They didn't win as many games, but they were scoring tons of points and like playing as a team and doing like running the triangle offense perfectly and all this kind of stuff. And it was because Jordan wasn't there anymore to hog the ball and be, and take every shot and get all the calls and like slow the game way down.
Well, that's
was like a point forward. He was just
right.
Anyways, okay.
All right, I got to rein. I got to rein you in. Hold on. Butter says RELAX, Ben. And Double Doink says it was a much rougher game than talk about that lame beer stuff and other things. And it was. I mean, he talked about those guys. They said that was their mission. Like anybody come in the lane, they're just getting decked. They're knocking them down. You do that today, it's not going to go over very well. And then, but
episode 2 talks about that too. It talks about the Bulls against the Pistons and how the Pistons just beat the snot out of Jordan over and over. And I was like, yeah, that was my favorite episode. It's the best episode by far because you watch Jordan just get his butt kicked. And I'm like, yeah.
I respected Rodman's energy, and I didn't know he was that smart about basketball, but I didn't like all his antics. And Eric vents a little bit about Rodman grabbing guys, flopping, doing different stuff. I didn't love all that, but whatever. They accomplished a lot. The league was what it was at the time. It's a lot more fair game now. Hopefully it comes back and they can play, and the Bucks can bring home their first title since 1971. We'd love that if the NBA can find a way to come back and do it. I know they're working on it. That's another interesting thing that was brought up in the Rodgers interview. I'm going to bring it back to the Packers here is, they asked him at one point, there's only a couple things. If you didn't watch the whole 30-some minute interview yet, it's actually just a phone. So you're just looking at some pictures and then maybe a couple little video footage if you watch it. So it's not really that much you're watching. However, there are only a couple things that were of importance there. A couple things we already talked about, another thing, and then we'll finish with one other, the most important thing that was said. And one of them was they asked him about what it would be like to play in front of empty stadiums. And it would be, he said it would be just really weird. He hopes he doesn't come to that.
Yeah.
He hopes that, but I understand these guys get paid tons of money. I understand, they're still playing the same game, but think about like the normal atmosphere. And these are guys that have gone, they come from high school programs that are big to college programs are even bigger to now the NFL, and they might play in front of empty stadiums. That would be really weird. And there is something to that, the crowd charging you up and kind of boosting you at times, and getting your energy up. So I don't know. That would be a whole different dynamic for people and a disadvantage for the Packers, really, because they travel so well and they have good road crowds and like all that stuff. So I think that would negatively impact the Packers team more than a lot of teams. The Dolphins are probably used to it or whatever, and some of the, the Jets or whatever, but there's certain teams like the Packers, man, that I think they use that crowd quite a bit. I don't know. What do you guys think? Think if they end up playing football with empty stadiums, that's going to hurt this team? I think it probably would a little, but who knows?
I think if it comes down to where they have to do that, I think they will though.
Yeah.
Just because the money, the TV money is so important to keep the NFL alive. Like they've got to play the games, and not only that, the companies. The broadcasting companies will be super happy because the ratings are going to go through the roof because there's going to be nothing else going on. Like there won't be any baseball. There won't be any probably basketball either. And then even like new shows, like no one's been able to like film any new TV shows or movies or nothing like that right now either. So it's like if they somehow found a way to play one game a week, in whatever stadium it is or whatever, and able to put that on TV, I mean, that's going to make a killing. I mean, just like the draft online made a killing this year, just doing that goofy, and it was weird. There was like people not even watching. Like I wasn't watching the draft. I was watching the Pat McAfee thing. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
so I mean, no matter what, I'm assuming they're gonna find a way to play. It just like
Yeah.
you said, it might not be in front of anybody. But
I mean, they'll pump in music and they'll pump in they might pump in like fake crowd noise for the home team too. You never know. Whatever. The Vikings been doing that for years, right? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But Double Doink says Joe Buck says no problem. They can CGI a crowd in and add cheer and boo track. Oh yeah, we're on the same wavelength there. Yeah, the Vikings been doing it for a long time. Okay, well, anyway, that was weird. Now, the last thing that Aaron Rodgers said. So if you don't listen to any of the thing, skip to like the last 2 minutes because the best question and answer is at the end. Repeatedly during the interview, Aaron Rodgers said a number of times how he reemphasized that he had said that he wanted to play into his 40s and that it really meant something to him to play with the Packers, one organization, his whole career. He said that a few times. And then they asked him kind of about that whole situation with the Jordan Love pick and with other things related to that and what it meant. And, his answer was pretty telling. I mean, people want to talk about he's calculated or he always says doesn't want to say whatever. He's always knows what he's saying and all this stuff and whatever. I think the guy just answers questions. I mean, for a person who's watched every damn locker interview and post-game press conference and everything he's done, I've listened to all of it for his whole career. And I think a bunch of the people that criticize him over stuff, I think they're way off base. For the most part, I see a guy who's just answering questions. Sometimes he gets asked stupid questions, but he answers the questions. And this one, I thought he answered really honestly. So I don't want to give it fully away. Ben, I don't know if you want to give a little bit of insight into it, but if you haven't watched it, go skip to the last 2 minutes or so and watch the answer to that question, because that'll tell you a lot. And
we're not going to talk about it.
All right, talk about it. It made me a little sad. I was sad after that question, answer to that question.
Yeah.
I was sad because he came out and he said that he's like, I think, what it said to me and what it showed me is that, and this is paraphrasing here, is that there are only so many things you can control. There are uncontrollables in this business. And while it means a lot to me to play with one organization for my entire career, and I want to keep playing as long as I'm feeling good, I don't know that is within my control anymore. And so that's the gist of it. There's a little bit more to it, and he said it better than that. But it makes me sad as a Packers fan, and it makes me sad as a Rodgers fan too. So,
yeah. And he said it repeatedly during the interview. He said it many times, like he can, he does not have the control over the one thing he wanted to do. The one thing he's been talking about for the last 3 years, really, is talking about finishing his career as a Packer.
Yeah.
And, that's I don't know. I mean, I'm sad, sure. What I mean, it's the thing that I listened to him, and the other thing he said was, what I can't control is my play on the field.
Right.
And if he's playing at an outstanding level and the team continues to win and he still answers questions the way he answered them today, the fans will be on his side. So unless the organization really, really wants to make the fans pissed, he will have some control based on his performance. But what it all comes down to is will Jordan Love develop into the player that trading up to get Gutekunst thinks he's going to be? Because that's the difference. It's all based on whether Love can develop and how fast that will happen. If he never develops, then Rodgers plays here until he's done. Because Love can't play or whatever. But once Love's trajectory kind of goes like this, and Rodgers is starting to go like this, Love wins, Rodgers gone. And Rodgers knows it. And he knew it in that interview. And that's the part that he said a couple times. But he also said, he said, like you and I've said many times, especially you've been on this the whole time. He said, he's like, everybody compares, my situation when I came in with Favre and the situation here. He's like, the difference is I continuously said I want to keep playing and end my career in Green Bay. And I want to play well into my 40s. Not well, but into my 40s. And Favre had been talking about maybe leaving 2 years before they drafted me. So it's totally different.
Yeah.
And it is totally different. And that's the thing that, in the long haul, when you listen to what he says, he was very calm, he was very professional, and he knows exactly what he's saying. If he stays this way and he plays well on the field, the organization will look terrible if they force him out. Like, they will look bad. And the fans won't have it. And hopefully they won't pick on Love if that happens. But, hey, if you kick a guy out who's still playing great, who's still got the best touchdown interception ratio, and the team continues to win and win and win and make the playoffs the next 3 years or 2 years or however long it is, and then you try to shoot him out of town when he's playing that well, and as long as Aaron Rodgers doesn't cause a rift in the team and a rift in the organization, then that's looks good on him. So that's the one thing I liked. His interview today showed me that he's ready to, be the professional, stay calm, do my job, control what I can control, play well, get my guys involved, lead the team the way it needs to be led, and that will lead to them having to make a really, really hard decision, and they look bad if they choose to get me out of town. That's what I saw or heard today. So that makes me good. It makes you sad. It makes me happy, or not happy, but it makes me go, okay, like Rodgers gets it, and he's willing to, he's going to work hard. He's going to know what's going on. He's not going to screw around, right?
Yep.
And as long as he doesn't, put little jabs in, like sometimes he likes to do, and just don't rift anything. Stay cool, stay on top. So the big question is going to be, what happens when Love starts to look in practice like he can do things? Will Rodgers still be as cool as he is now? That's the question that's going to happen. Right now, they have no practice. Right now, he's never even played with Love or even seen him in practice. So he has no idea what he's like, really.
Right.
So until that happens, that's, Rodgers will always be cool until, some kind of spike in Love's play makes him go, oh, I'm worried now, or whatever. Then we'll see how Rodgers acts, But as of right now, I'm good with it.
One thing, though, is, McCarthy talked about it, that he's the most competitive person he's ever been around. So, if Love starts showing signs, that's just going to make him more competitive and want to beat him. So I think that could be a driving force to make him stay on top of his game, because he is so competitive. So I don't see that being an issue. But I do think, Eric points out a quote. He said he did say this too when he was talking about the Jordan Love pick. He said, and obviously they thought he was such a great talent, they needed to go up and get him.
Yeah.
He did mention that, and that is still the confusing part. You have what happened, what the Packers did, then you had all the stuff they said that completely contradicted it, saying, oh, well, Aaron's our quarterback and we wanted to play for a long time, and this is a pick for the future, and all these things and whatever. It's just, none of it meshed after. So you don't know what's really going on. However, you do know that Rodgers has a great track record of having good relationships with backup quarterbacks, of helping them, of answering questions, of being, he's had guys that were really inquisitive and wanted to learn. And he's always been there for those guys. So he's going to do the same thing here. And like you and I said, like when we went over the first round picks for 20 years, there were a lot of wasted first round picks in there. So in the end, if this just ends up being another wasted first round pick, well, it's nothing new for the Packers. Is it disappointing that, they could have had a difference maker that could impact the defense this year or something like that? Instead, yes, but it might just end up being a wasted first round pick again. And if that's it, well, that's it. Or maybe they groom him along enough, realize he's never going to quite be to that caliber, but they can dress him up and ship him off for a pick at some point, third year in, something like that. You never know. Maybe that's what will happen in the end. Um, so yeah, I mean, some people thinking maybe he'd go to the Rams, double doink. I said I think the Raiders are more likely. And yeah, the Rams are kind of stuck with Goff for a while. You're right. And Eric says he wouldn't mind. He'd like to see Aaron Rodgers come to the Raiders, work with Chucky. It might be kind of fun. So the thing, the obvious thing here is this has happened many, many times before, right? Joe Montana didn't finish with the 49ers. Brady's not finishing with the Patriots. You got other quarterbacks, Favre finishing elsewhere. I mean, other quarterbacks having to move on to other
Manning,
franchise. Manning, sure, yeah. So
Rivers this last year too.
so
Not that
one,
Rivers was a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but
right. But one, it's happened before, and it could happen again. We just hope that the Packers would be a little different when, more along the Saints version of this, where they've been communicating with Drew Brees throughout. And yes, they kind of have a backup plan, sort of, but they're still committed to Brees, and who knows. But anyway, it would be nice to see that end, and maybe it will still be, and maybe they'll get a different pick for him. Probably not a first round pick, but in the end, whatever. They've wasted plenty of first round picks. So that's what I got on all that. You should watch it. If you didn't catch the interview, at least take the last 2-3 minutes of it.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
What do you make of the fact that when Rodgers went through all the receivers and he named them all, he went through the tight ends and he mentioned them by name. And when it came to DeGuara, he called him the third round pick. He didn't either know his name or he didn't say his name. And then when he talked about Aaron Jones, and he specifically talked about Jamal Williams' workout plan and regiment.
Yep.
And then when he talked about Dillon, he called him the second round pick, or the running back they got in the second round. We got in the second round.
Yep.
So either he doesn't know their names, which I find hard to believe, considering they've already had meetings together on Zoom and stuff. And I know it's a whole 53 dude or whatever, how many 90 got, whatever, how many hundred the guys are on there. But still, these are guys that are going to be part of your team, and he doesn't call them by name. And it's not like DeGuara is a trickier name, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers is like the smartest guy around, and Dillon is pretty dang easy name to remember. So what do you take of the fact that he doesn't call them by name? He calls them the third round pick and the second round pick at their respective positions, but goes out of his way praising all the guys that are coming back.
I think that sends a message to me that he feels the same way I do about the Packers draft, which is that it was terrible and they made a lot of bad choices and they reached for a lot of guys they didn't need at spots they didn't need. And yes, these are kids coming in, rookies. They might turn into something, they might not, but I think he's looking at it the same way as I am, which is I don't think they can rely on any of these picks to be very impactful at all this year. And that goes completely against how the NFL works. When you're going to have a good team, you need to have draft picks that make an impact. That's what all the really good teams that take a jump, that have a significant improvement from the year before, that's what they do. But I don't know if this draft, I don't think is going to bear much fruit. And if it does, it's going to be 2-3 years down the road. So I think that's what it says to me. And I think he's right.
Well, I mean, those are the things I noticed was his tone was very relaxed throughout the entire thing. These are the three things I'd say. His tone was relaxed. He sent a message a couple times saying he was surprised and he wasn't thrilled and that kind of stuff. And also the fact that he says that he doesn't have control over the one thing he wants is to finish his career at Green Bay. And then the third thing was that I just got out of the interview was that he didn't mention any of these other offensive weapons that I got in the second and third rounds, very high picks. Doesn't mention them by name at all. And I thought that was a big thing. So, I mean, it might not be a big thing. I don't know. But what I'm saying is he probably should know their names, and he probably does know their names, I would think. And he doesn't use their names. So
Well, he mentioned
I don't
Aaron
know.
Jones, and
Yeah, he said Aaron
maybe
Jones is the man.
he feels like a lot of us did that some games Aaron Jones was highly underutilized last year. We don't know why.
And he likes Jamal Williams too. I mean, here's
Yeah,
the thing. The
yeah,
thing about Rodgers that I've noticed over all these years, and I brought it up last time. He when he finds a guy he likes, i.e., Alan Lazard, Jordy Nelson, whoever it is, and he thinks that they're guys he can count on, and he likes those guys. Those are the guys he wants to play with. You know, and the thing is, Dylan and DeGuara could turn into those guys. DeGuara could turn into a Richard Rodgers, a guy who can make some catches now. I mean, Richard Rodgers. Think about the tight ends the Packers have had, right?
yeah.
Since Richard Rodgers. Think about it. Cook was hurt a lot, and yeah, he had the big catch in Dallas, right? But he wasn't really. He probably would have been used more if he wouldn't have gotten hurt. But then they get Bennett. What did he do? Nothing. Jimmy
Yuck.
Graham and Mercedes is a great guy. He brought a big dog again in the interview, but he's not doesn't do anything. I mean, Richard Rodgers was he had the most targets and made the most catches and plays at tight end.
Yeah, and
Really,
he was.
in the
I
last
mean,
5-6 years, and he hasn't been in
and
the team in 5 years. So I mean,
he wasn't
I don't
fast.
know.
He
No,
was smart. He was smart, and he had great hands.
but Rodgers went to him a couple.
Yeah,
On big. I can remember it was a nice, awesome seam route, and Rodgers had to
yeah.
put it between safety and the linebacker, like right down. Richard Rodgers grabs it out of the air, scores a touchdown. I mean, it's like 37-yard touchdown. I don't know who was the guy. I can't remember. I just remember it's in my head. It was a great catch, and he was a guy who could. And like I told you, DeGuara looks like Richard Rodgers to me. So I think he can become something. But I think that's the only thing I noticed from this interview where Rodgers is a little salty on is, he likes his guys from last year, and he's confident in his guys, I think. And he's a little salty on the new guys and maybe not believing in them yet, or because he can't see them. And maybe he's like, you know what, we don't need a. I mean, if you're not going to get me a huge, awesome, dynamic weapon, you're going to get me a bruising running back and a utility Ed West type guy at tight end, who's not even as good a blocker as Ed West ever was, really. But anyways,
Yeah, yeah.
then what am I? I'm not going to worry about these guys. I'm going to worry about the guys that I have that I know I can count on, or the guys that I could see can improve, where MVS can be something if he just has a little more confidence and all that kind of stuff. So that's just what I saw. And I thought I'd ask you and see what you thought. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it just means that he feels like these aren't guys that he can really count on or thinks a lot of right now, and I don't think he's wrong. So, Eric chimes in and says he thinks it's a make or break year for Derek Carr. He's solid statistically, but hasn't inspired a lot of confidence. And bringing AR in next year, maybe just sells a few more tickets, but could be a big boost to a young team. Um, I think with the Raiders, I think Raiders is a good landing spot for him if the Packers decide to move on in a couple of years. And I think it'd be 2 years down the road, but I do think, I think that'd be a good fit, be closer to his home, all that stuff, and I think he'd be fine. And I don't think Derek Carr is going to do much there for a while. I mean, he's kind of peaked. He did his whole thing. He was all of a sudden, five years ago, he was going to be better than Aaron Rodgers, and of course, he's still not. And he's okay, but he is who he is. He's okay. He's okay. Hey Bruce, how's it going? All right. Do you want to get into anything else tonight, Ben? About some drafts, some goody drafts?
You want to? We talk about that. We could talk. Have you been watching? I also want to talk about the
I thought I had.
100 Years series with the Packers. I don't know if you've been watching that.
Oh
Every
yeah.
Thursday night it shows up on YouTube, and
All right. Talk about that.
so want to talk about that. Well, this week was the '80s week, and so it's on YouTube right now, and they talk about the '80s teams and stuff. So I was really excited because I was expecting to have like a good 20 minutes at least out of this hour about the 1989, team that like got everybody super pumped. And it was like, I mean, I can remember you and I, for instance, we had the Tim Harris Sack Man T-shirts. Remember those T-shirts with Tim Harris, and he had like a bag over his shoulder with a bunch of like quarterback like arm and a quarterback leg sticking out because he had the sack with all the because he had sacked all the quarterbacks. Number 97, Tim Harris, remember? And they had
Yep.
like the Keith Woodside shirt where he's like run over dudes and all that kind of stuff, and the Brent Fullwood shirt. I mean, of course, the Magic Man shirt where he had like a Buddy Rabbit pulled out of a hat with the Magic Man T-shirt. We had all those shirts, and it was awesome. And that was when I really, really became a huge Packer fan. Was that year, obviously. And I thought, oh, I'm so excited to watch this 80s one because I had to sit through that 70s one, which was terrible. But so I watched this 80s one, and it's like I'm going, man, this has been 45 minutes. When are we going to get to the good stuff? Like, this must be a really long episode, And they finally get to it, and it's like the last 8 minutes, they talk about the 1989 team, like barely at all, like a little bit. They talk about Mikowski a little bit. And I thought for sure they talked about Sterling, because Sterling he was his second year in the league. And do you know that Mikowski led the league in passing that year?
Yeah.
Passing yards?
Yep, passing yards, right.
And Sterling had like 12 touchdowns or something like that. And
Sterling Sharp was a monster, dude. Yeah. He was so good.
And they barely spoke about Sterling Sharp, like at all. Like
what?
Like at the very end, they showed like 4 clips of him. And it was just like, yeah, and Sterling Sharp was pretty good. He had 12 touchdowns. And I'm like, what? So I don't know if they're saving Sterling Sharp for the 90s, which makes no sense to me, because that's where you are going to spend most of your time with Favre and Holmgren and Wolf and the Super Bowl winning team and the Super Bowl going back team and the whole dynamic of that and Holmgren leaving and all. Like, that's like a 3-hour show right there. So you think you would give Sterling Sharp some love in the 80s show, but they don't. I mean, they give Lynn Dickey, they give Lynn Dickey, who, don't get me wrong, I always like Lynn Dickey. He could throw the ball real far and all this kind of stuff, right? Yeah. And Larry McCarron, holy crap, Larry McCarron. Larry McCarron is in there. Like, I've never seen 25,000 shots of a center in a game in B-roll shots than I did in this episode of Larry McCarron in his B-roll. It was crazy. Anyways, but they spent all this time on like the early 80s. And they did make the playoffs. I forgot this. They made the playoffs and won a game against the
really?
Huh. Yeah.
Wow.
Against the Redskins or somebody, I don't know. And then they lost the next week.
Yeah.
But anyways, that was like 1982 or 3 or somewhere in there. And then the next year they didn't make this playoffs. And then next year they fired Bart Starr because they brought in a new guy as the head honcho. 2 years before, and he just fired Bart Starr, even though they just made the playoffs and had 2 winning records in a row. And I'll say this. Now, Forrest Gregg is a pro football Hall of Famer at tackle, right? For the Packers 60s teams, right? He was the head coach of the Packers, and I'll tell you right now, in this documentary, they make him look like the worst head coach in the history of all time. Like, they just rip Forrest Gregg, a new one, like for like 20 minutes of this documentary is spent on talking how bad of a coach Forrest Gregg was, how he couldn't relate to the players, how he was a big jerk, how he just tried to get rid of, because that was the other thing, because when he came after 1 year, he got rid of Larry, he got rid of Lynn Dickey, he got rid of a couple other guys. So Larry's like, he just got rid of all the good guys and blah, 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 and tried to bring in his old guys and all this kind of stuff. And Forrest Gregg was only there for 4 years as a head coach, and he got canned. And that was when they hired Lindy Infante in 1988 or whatever. But anyways, you got to watch it because, yeah. But I was just like, where's the Mikowski stuff? Where's the excitement? They spent all this time with Larry McCarron's centered B-roll. I'm like, did Larry McCarron pay for all this documentary, or what the heck's going on? I was like, wow. Lynn Dickey, he was on there constantly, and then it was 5 minutes of magic, like 5 minutes.
Did they have a close-ups of McCarron's hand, or was his finger still normal?
They didn't really have. There's a couple times where he went like this, and you saw doing that, but that's not what you were looking for.
Well, that is weird because the 89 season was probably like the most exciting season of the decade, and
it was.
I don't know.
And I can remember when the Packers would, and I don't know if they still do this, but I'll never forget, they had, and you know this because our grandpa was very important in this, the Packers would, in the offseason after 1989 to the 90 season, they would go and tour around the Wisconsin and pick up basketball games for charity against local teams. And they came to Algoma, which is our hometown. And I think Algoma had a team of teachers and random people from Algoma,
including my old crappy middle school basketball coach, who made me hate basketball, and then I stopped playing after. He did. He made me hate it because because he made me set picks all the time, and then I was just supposed to get rebounds. The only time I get to shoot is if I got a put back, and I was like, "What?" Anyway, yeah, he was in there, and some other guys. It was the El Goma All Stars, Ben.
El Goma All Stars. That was the
We remember we did
stars.
We did have our we did have our one fourth grade teacher, Mr. Prochnow, who was 6'8". He's 6'8", a monster of a man. As a fourth grade teacher, you went into that dude's classroom as a fourth grade teacher. That was really something because he was huge. But he was a gentle giant, but he was on that team too. So he gave them at least some validity there.
Right. But the thing was, like, the guys on the team, like, you'd think it would be like just scrub guys, but like Tim Harris was on that team. Like, there was like, and Terry Mickens, no, not Terry Mickens, Aubrey Matthews, who was my favorite receiver in those days. I remember I loved Aubrey Matthews. Then I like Terry Mickens. I like a lot of like the fifth wide receiver on the team is like my favorite guy for some reason. And then and also the running back and Magic. I like everybody apparently. But anyways, if you remember that, they came and it was an awesome game. And our grandpa, who had to get both of his legs amputated because of blood clots and some other stuff. And I don't know my mom did something where she got in a hold of the Packer team and also the El Goma All Stars. And I don't know what she did. She talked to somebody to get him into this, and they made our grandpa the honorary captain for that game.
Yep, I remember.
And I don't know if you remember his face, but it was like the greatest thing for grandpa. It was awesome. And to see him down there, like Tim Harris, like giving him a high five and stuff like that. And grandpa's like acting like the head coach and stuff. It was awesome.
Yep, I do remember that pretty strongly, and it was very cool. Grandpa was a huge Packers fan, huge for sure. And he spent a lot of time in the 80s talking about the teams from the 60s because that's all anybody could talk about. But
talking about how Don Mikowski needed to cut his hair.
Oh yeah, right.
And he also called me what did he call it? He used to call me, remember I had long hair and my earring, and he used to call me Betty or Betsy instead of Ben. And I was like,
oh wow.
Yeah, he used to call me like Betty. Well, you were like, oh, Betty, because I had long hair and
he was old school, man. He was old school.
He didn't like the earring or the long hair. But hey,
Eric says, wasn't it Tim Harris that broke the glass? I think that did happen. Yeah, I think it was Tim Harris.
Yeah.
He was one of the Packers basketball team. What the heck did they call it again? I can't remember what it was called.
I don't know. They had some offensive linemen on there too.
But yeah, they didn't have many guys that were that tall, and they didn't have anybody that could dunk other than probably Harris. So, yeah, and he was a pretty big guy. He wasn't like these athletic receiver guys that can dunk, because he was probably about
he was like 6'3",
270 or whatever.
Yeah, he was up there. But he had really tiny, skinny legs too. He was one of those guys with like the big upper body,
broad shoulders, really long arms, skinny legs. Yeah, and the guns, the shooters, man. After you got a sack, after you got a sack.
But anyways, none of that stuff's in there. They don't talk in that documentary. They don't talk about Tim Harris at all. Like they don't even mention Tim Harris. And I know he had like 1 year or 2 years where he was good. I get it.
Yeah.
But that year was that was the start of the Packers being relevant and just in the area of the Green Bay and Kewaunee County and Door County and Brown County and all that stuff. It was huge. And it wasn't like that before that. So it's one of those things where you're like, how does it only get like 5 minutes at the end? It just, and here's another thing that happened. They talked to
hold on.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Eric says Jeff Query, one of Eckes' favorite, he could have dunked. He could have dunked.
He was Eckes' favorite, I'm sure, because he was the white receiver. I think Jeff Query was on that team, but I don't know.
I think so. Yeah, probably.
But the other thing they showed was, here's the thing that was really weird. So in the beginning of the 80s, right, they talked about how great Lynn Dickey was. They kept saying how great Lynn Dickey was, even though he didn't make the Pro Bowl or anything. But then they said about how there was 1 year where Lofton, Jefferson, and Kaufman were all in the Pro Bowl, but Lynn Dickey wasn't. And Larry McCarron was like, how the heck does that happen? How does this guy get 3 different guys in the Pro Bowl, but Lynn Dickey doesn't make it? And I get how that doesn't make any sense. And they talked a lot about Lofton and how great he was and all this kind of stuff. And good guys and this and that, good guys. And then they talked about when Forrest Gregg came and he got rid of all the good guys and brought in the bad guys. And they talked about how there was bad blood or bad guys in the locker room, and they were doing bad things outside of the locker room and this kind of that stuff. And for a second, they showed a clip of Lofton and what he did. I remember something about, didn't he have some kind of domestic abuse or something? I can't remember exactly what it was. But then they shipped him out of town. He went to or he cut him or whatever it was. He went to the Bills, right? They don't mention that at all. They just talk about all these other guys that Forrest Gregg apparently brought in that were bad guys. So they built up Lofton about how nice, how great a player he was, and how good guy on the team. And then when they talked about the problem guys, there was a little blip, like a square second of Lofton something happened. You know, like they showed like the headline in the newspaper or something, like for like a split second, and they're talking about bad things happening. You know, and Greg brought in the wrong type of guys in. So I thought that was weird that they wouldn't. You know, they spent a lot of time talking about Lofton and how great he was as a player, but they didn't bring that up. If they're gonna, you know, they brought up all these other guys that had problems and were issues, you know, on the team. So,
Well, the reason, for that is that James Lofton has been brought back into the fold of the Packers and he's around a little bit and they're still a business and they want to promote their former
yeah,
stars and current stars and all that business. So,
I mean, it's definitely a Packer production by
right.
far. I mean,
Right.
Mark Murphy is the executive producer of it.
Oh,
and there you go. Yeah.
whew.
So, but anyways,
Oh,
if anybody has time, and I had a lot of time for the last couple of months, so that's why I started watching it. But every week on Thursday night, it shows up on YouTube. And
Wait a minute.
they started in 1919 and go to like the 20s, and the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So this next Thursday is going to be the 90s Super Bowl team and that whole Holmgren run. So it's going to be really, for all of us guys in our 40s, it's going to be the key awesome one to watch this next Thursday coming up. So get ready for that.
Right on. And you spoiled it. I thought this just came out because it was put on by like NFL Fan Zone on YouTube just this week, the Mike Holmgren Football Life, which I thought was really awesome if you haven't seen it. But then you said, oh yeah, that was out like a couple years ago on NFL Network. I'm like, yeah, great. Okay, well. Anyway, I told mom and dad about it because I didn't think they'd seen it. And I watched it and I loved it because it's got like, and it more clearly paints the picture that you and I had discussed where you brought up that Mike Holmgren clearly should be in the Hall of Fame. Why he isn't is beyond anybody's understanding, because not only did what he did as a head coach, but what he did before that. I mean, he worked with Joe Montana and they talked about how he coached Joe Montana and then he made him better. So and then he worked with Steve Young, Brett Favre, and Matt Hasselbeck. He took 4 different quarterbacks to the Super Bowl. And 3 of them won Super Bowls with him, and the other one should have. And we all know about that too. And Holmgren even talks about that.
That was interesting. Did you see that?
Yes. It's a great, I mean, that thing is fabulous. That is a wonderful production, and it's really insightful, and it's really entertaining. I mean, you would think, okay, because most people think about Mike Holmgren, you're like, oh, that's not very entertaining. He was kind of boring, blah, blah, blah. No. He opens up. All these players open up about what he was like. And then he even talks about that Super Bowl and how the Seahawks got screwed and how he felt he made a mistake. And that was what ended up swinging the whole game. And he's got ties to some of these people from going way back. Like he coached Young at BYU and then he coaches them in the pros.
I never knew that.
And he talked about how he scouted Favre for the 49ers and he had this list on him. And then all of a sudden he ends up in Green Bay and he has Favre and he's like, okay. And he's working with that. And he talked about his riffs with Hasselbeck and battles with him for a while and how his wife had to interject and stuff. So like,
well, he said that Hasselbeck and Steve Young were the 2 guys who would always push back. Like they'd always be like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And he'd have to explain it to like Favre and Montana would be like, okay, whatever. Like Montana would just do it and Favre would just do whatever. But Young and Hasselbeck wanted to know the reasons why. He said, and that's one thing he said about those 2 guys. He said I always had a lot of problem dealing with those 2 guys, but their questions were valid. They just wanted to know why we're doing this and that kind of thing. So that was cool.
Yeah. And then on top of it, in the very beginning, they show him playing football.
Yeah.
And they got some really great clips and they showed how he could throw the ball. I was like, holy crap, he really could throw the ball. But he didn't, like the rest of it, the footwork and running and stuff didn't look very good. But he could wing the ball. And then they had this funny clip as well where Steve Young, they all look at it and they're like, holy crap, where he like trips a guy that was on the ground and got up and then Holmgren just like trips him and stuff blatantly.
That brings back memories for me. Remember when I did that one time?
If you haven't seen it, and I hadn't until this week. It's pretty awesome. So go check it out. It's on YouTube. Look up Mike Holmgren, Football Life. It's really, really entertaining and really cool and fun. And it brings back some good memories with the Packers. And it shows, some really cool people interviewed with Joe Montana, Steve Young, Brett Favre, and Matt Hasselbeck. And then, of course, Holmgren. So
There's one
really,
thing in
really,
there
really
too
good
that
stuff.
that was that they talked about that I never knew, and it was very interesting. That there was a point in 1994 or 95 or somewhere in there where Holmgren got all the coaches together, and they were talking about pulling Favre and starting Brunell.
Yep.
For the rest of the season because Favre kept doing dumb stuff.
Yep.
And apparently they don't go out and say this, but Favre says that if Holmgren wouldn't have stuck with him, or he said if Holmgren would have went with the coach's decision, his career would have been very different. Which means the coaches maybe not all of them, but all the coaches in that room, the majority wanted to switch to Brunell in whatever year this was. And Holmgren stuck with Favre, which is very interesting to me.
Right.
Because I always thought Holmgren left Green Bay because he couldn't stand Favre not doing what he wanted him to do. How many times do you see him on the sideline going, why did he do that? What is he? Get him out of there. Get the court. Get the other one. He's like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
Like that scene's in there.
Yeah, he's ready to bring in the backup, and then he's like, oh, hold on a minute.
Yeah. So it's like, and I always thought he left town because he was like, Favre was not my pick. Wolf was. That's why I went to Seattle, because he could be the GM and head coach, right? So it was very interesting to me that Holmgren stuck with Favre when the coaches decision, all the other coaches were like, maybe we should switch to Brunell, and Holmgren stuck with Favre. So that's interesting, and it makes me say, okay, maybe Holmgren didn't want to get away from Favre. Maybe he just wanted to, have his own control over some of the players. Maybe he didn't like some of the things, like having a guy over his head.
Yeah,
a
new challenge. Yeah, and he wanted that. He wanted that GM gig. And then the other thing that was interesting in there that he said too is that it showed clearly, like I'm trying to figure out, I want to go back and watch it again because I'm trying to figure out, like, how did he become such a good coach of football? I want to go back and look at that aspect again. But he clearly wasn't afraid to stand up to people because he was like a newer coach with the 49ers.
Oh, yeah.
And they were having a bad year. And he talks about this and how Bill Walsh, legendary coach, right? It goes around, he's like, brings all the coaches together and he says, guys, what's wrong here? What's wrong? What's going on with the team? We're this great team. We're like 6-5. What's happening? What's wrong with our season? And then everyone stays quiet. And then Holmgren's like, well, Bill, I think you're the problem. And then Walsh like storms out or whatever. And then all the other coaches like, why'd you have to say it? Your big mouth and all this crap and whatever. And then Walsh comes back and is like, you know what? I think you're right. I've been doing this wrong. We got to adjust some things and blah, blah, blah. And then they went on to win the Super Bowl, win a bunch of games and win the Super Bowl. And Joe Montana played his best Super Bowl game of his life. And is like, so clear. And he was pretty young at that point. So clearly he believed in himself and didn't have a problem standing up to people. So that's pretty
Walsh was already a 2-time winning Super Bowl head coach at that point.
Right.
What the problem was he would not commit to one quarterback or the other. He would have them both be practicing 50% of the time in practice, and then he would play Montana most of the time, but sometimes he'd bring Young in, and that was the problem. And Holmgren said, you're the problem, Walsh. You need to pick a quarterback and stick with him so that he feels comfortable, he gets the reps in practice, and he's ready to go. And then that's what you're talking about. And then Walsh came back in and he said, okay, all right, Holmgren. He's like, I'm going to start Montana.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, and if we don't win, you're fired. So he was like, we need to win. And luckily they won, and they went on to win the Super Bowl that year too. But
classic. Yeah, that's
it's interesting. It's a good video. It's a good, it's really weird because they call it Mike Holmgren's Football Life. And it is about Holmgren, but it's also a really cool look at Montana, Young, Favre, and Hasselbeck too.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of all in there. And it also shows that really Matt Hasselbeck is also one of my favorite Packers. God, I'm talking about my favorite Packers. He's no Magic. No, I'm just kidding. He's way better than Magic ever was.
Yeah.
But anyways, but it shows that Hasselbeck really, really got screwed and should be a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a bunch of crap, to be honest with you. And because when you compare him, because Hasselbeck, Montana and Young and Favre, those are all-time great Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And then there's Matt Hasselbeck. But when you actually look at the stuff and look at the video, and watch the game plan and talk and see how the players talk, you realize, yeah, Hasselbeck probably should have been good enough to be a Hall of Fame quarterback as well. And it's all because the refs took that game away from him against the Steelers.
And he suffered most of his career with subpar receivers and weapons to throw to. Like those guys were terrible on that team. They dropped more balls than anybody, and you know how I hate drop balls.
And now that he was playing with Shaun Alexander, who had more touchdowns than anybody in the world that one year, right? He broke the record like 2 years in a row or whatever. Like he broke his own record the year after or something. He wasn't getting the 2-yard touchdown passes Brett Favre got to Ed West. They were running Jackson into the end zone, boom, in the end zone, boom. Like Hasselbeck didn't get all those cheap touchdown passes like that. Yep. So it's a good video to watch.
It's really good, entertaining.
And there's a lot of good stuff.
Yep. You know, and Favre's in there, and like you said, other guys. You get to learn more about that whole dynamic of the Packers and beforehand, and what Holmgren what made him all who he was. So, and you hear more about him. He talks about his motorcycle. You know, he's always famous for motorcycle riding. And for those,
and anybody who's old statesman or innocent men guy or fan or whatever, there's a little clip of Holmgren doing his Big Bop and the whatever the heck he's singing a cappella. He's singing a cappella with some guys. It's really bad, but it's in there and it's funny. And he's dancing and doing it. It's just weird. And he's like 6'6", and all the other guys are like 5'9". So he's like this big giant goofball singing and dancing with all those little guys. That clip's in there too.
All right, we're gonna save the Goody overview of his drafts for next time or another show because there's a lot to dig into there, and we've gone on long enough. We hope you guys are doing well. We feel better than we did when we started this show. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Either way, thanks for hanging with us. Take care of yourselves. Be safe, and everybody stay healthy out there. Okay.